Foreign influence lurked around the 2016 election, which Donald Trump won. Foreign influence lurked around the 2020 election, which Donald Trump lost. Foreign influence lurked around the 2024 election, which Donald Trump won. You know the election he complains about. Influence means trying to alter perceptions, debate, and information flows around a pending election. It is a decades-old spycraft stratagem, sharpened during the Cold War by America's adversaries and, if we are being honest, and we should be, America itself. We used it in other countries that were up for grabs in the relentless Cold War battle for global supremacy. Influence does not mean changing an election outcome, changing or nullifying votes. That has never happened in this country, not once. President Trump may suggest in a primetime address tonight that it happened in 2020. It did not. He may suggest it might have come close to happening in 2020. That would stretch credulity to the point of snapping. Joe Biden won that election by 7 million votes and with 306 electoral votes. If foreign influence is a serious issue, and the president will tell you tonight it is, one would think his administration would bankroll efforts to combat it. President Trump has done precisely the opposite, slashing the budget of the federal agency that helps states repel cyber intrusions and reducing that agency's workforce by nearly a third. This administration has also abandoned cooperative efforts with states to share best practices and early warning intelligence on bad foreign cyber actors. Rhetoric versus reality. That is the tension today and every day when Trump touts election integrity. The other tension is with the federal courts. Trump keeps trying to increase federal controls over voter rolls, procedures, and other matters. Courts keep denying him on firm constitutional grounds. As we've said before on this program, states oversee elections with broad guidance from Congress, not the president. So we must ask ourselves, is this about something else? Rhetorically, a prelude for Trump to, as he has repeatedly said, federalize the upcoming midterm elections, deploy troops, bring National Guard under federal control, dispatch them to voting precincts, counting centers? That we cannot categorically rule this scenario out tells us where we as a nation find ourselves. Republicans who speak about this matter publicly hope this is not what comes to pass. They are minimally psyched about tonight's address. They would prefer Trump talk about inflation, job growth, Trump accounts, AI, education reform, immigration, even the continuing and unpopular Iran war, anything but rehashed grievances about a long-lost election, the result of which was confirmed via recounts, audits, lawsuits, and certifications. But about all this, Trump is defiant. And defiant would be a high-index tone prediction for tonight's address. With more on that, we turn to Ed O'Keefe at the White House. Ed.
Major, good to see you. Look, CBS News has learned that this speech is expected to reveal previously unreported alleged Chinese meddling in U.S. elections, and multiple sources tell us he's expected to reveal the intelligence community withheld details about Chinese influence operations during his first term. But beyond that, it's not entirely clear what more he might show or suggest regarding future elections and any concerns with them. And I think, as you always do, it's important to reiterate to the viewers, there is no one way to manipulate results across every single voting location across the country, because by design in the Constitution, it is a decentralized process controlled by your state and your community. And so the idea that some foreign entity could come into the country and manipulate results in a mass scale is by design not possible and has never happened before. And there's no evidence of any direct interference by foreign entities in American elections ever succeeding. And so we asked throughout the day for more information on what exactly it is he wants to talk about tonight that's any different than what he has focused on for the last 6 or 7 years regarding his concerns with the 2020 election. And the White House essentially does what classic White House press secretary situations with reporters do on days like today when there's a big speech. Tune in tonight, you'll find out. But this exchange with Caroline Leavitt is telling. Take a look. Concerns about the election. Will the president accept the results of November's elections?
Look, Ed, you should tune into the president's speech tonight before you jump ahead to conclusions about what's actually in the speech. Again, I've seen a lot of reporting and misreporting about what the president will say. We hope CBS will take the speech, and all Americans should take it.
There were no presumptions being made by this reporter, simply trying to lay out whether or not the president plans to accept the results of the elections. The vice president was asked that question yesterday, and he said yes, but that doesn't mean we're not going to look into concerns that people have had about potential fraud and make sure that we're doing everything we can to avoid it. It's also part of the president's push to pass what he calls the Save America Act, or this national voter regulation bill that would establish national voter ID and citizenship standards that doesn't currently have the sufficient support to pass and probably wouldn't be able to be implemented in time for this year's elections anyway. That'll be a part of tonight's speech undoubtedly as well, because every time he talks about elections these days, he's trying to compel fellow Republicans to pass something that right now they just can't. So, Major, this is, one of his favorite topics, election integrity, as they call it here at the White House. Not one that is necessarily top of mind for most voters in the country, certainly for some, a lot of his supporters, but not for everyone, at a time when there are concerns about the future of the economy, the war with Iran, immigration, and other issues.
Ed O'Keefe at the White House. Thank you so very much. So let's talk more about this with CBS News election law expert and contributor David Becker. He is also the executive director of the Center for Election Innovation and Research. David, let's work on some terminology here. Meddling, foreign influence, how should we understand what those words actually mean and are meant to convey?
Right. When foreign adversaries seek to perhaps influence American elections, they're going to use tools like disinformation, social media. We've seen this regularly. Our foreign adversaries regularly do this. We generally consider these influence operations. These are very different from interference operations, infiltration exercises, where foreign adversaries might seek to actually get inside election infrastructure, mess with some of the technology that we have. But we rarely see that. In fact, the only time we've really ever seen that was in the 2016 election when Russia attempted to do that. They didn't successfully change anything. The Senate Intelligence Committee, both parties, found that to be true. But what foreign adversaries have discovered is that because of our decentralized elections, because of the security around our systems, because of paper ballots and audits, it is really hard to infiltrate election systems to change an election. But through those influence operations, trying to spread disinformation on social media, that is a low-risk, high-reward proposition, and I think we see that regularly from our foreign adversaries.
And speaking of foreign adversaries, what do we know about China and its various efforts in this space?
Well, all of the information about foreign influence operations in 2020 has already been released. There was a declassified report issued by the intelligence community in March of 2021 that was a declassified version of a classified version of that report with more information in it that was presented to the President of the United States on January 7th, 2021, of all days. That was presented to President Trump, who was in office. He saw all of the classified information. And what that showed is that China, kind of similarly to other adversaries, particularly Iran and Russia, might have attempted influence operations. Specifically in that report with regard to China, a majority of the intelligence community had determined that, or thought that, China did not even attempt to influence our elections. They didn't really think it was worth it. There was a minority view that they attempted to influence our elections through disinformation, but there was no evidence that anyone in the intelligence community brought forward that indicated they actually interfered with the technology or the election infrastructure in the elections. There was no evidence whatsoever that it altered anything with regard to the vote count or the voting process.
And David, to expand on that last point you made, is there ever an incident in American history that we are aware of a foreign adversary infiltrating and materially altering the outcome of an election?
Infiltrating, yes. Altering the election, no. Russia did gain access to the Illinois voter registration database in the summer of 2016. It was discovered after about 3 weeks. I believe the Russians wanted to be discovered. They did some things that made it obvious that they were doing this. And Illinois subsequently confirmed that no records had been altered, nothing had changed. Voter data is very secure. There are backups. There are various ways to make sure of that. If a foreign adversary ever did gain access to voting infrastructure, like a voter registration database, we would see that because voters would have problems at the polls. They would be deleted, their information was changed. We have never seen any of that. If they ever tried to access even one voting machine, which are not connected to the internet, they can't be infiltrated en masse. You can only do it one at a time with physical access. Even then, we would discover it thanks to the paper ballots and audits that every state conducts after an election that confirm by hand that the machine count was accurate.
Very quickly, David, how prepared are we for the midterms?
I think despite all the disinformation, despite some of the attacks from the federal government on state and local election officials, I think we're seeing in the midterms that the states are running, or in their midterm primaries, the states are really well prepared. The elections are going very well despite all of the disinformation, and we're about 2/3 the way through. We're going to see a lot of primaries coming up in August. I have really high expectations for the quality of this election, thanks to the public servants who run those elections, and I think we might even see record high turnout for a midterm election in November.
David Becker, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Major.